Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the White House. My name is Maya Shankar, and I serve as Senior Advisor for the Social and Behavioral Sciences at the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and I also chair the Social and Behavioral Sciences team. I just wanted to thank all of you for coming from near and far to join us for today's summit. Today we're going to hear about the administration's progress translating research insights from the behavioral sciences into improvements in the lives of Americans. I'd like to quickly recognize those who have contributed to this effort and made today's event possible before introducing our President and Science Advisor. I'd like to first recognize my colleagues in agencies across the federal government who have collaborated with the Social and Behavioral Sciences team. Every success story that you read about in the report is theirs. My team feels honored to work with you and to learn from all of you and your program expertise as we try and find the best ways of improving outcomes across a wide range of areas. I'd also like to extend thanks to my colleagues in the White House who helped make this event and this report possible. With particular thanks to my colleagues Kristen Lee, Rachel Leonard, Meredith Drosbach, Faye Jenks, Kumar Garg, and my boss Tom Khalil, who notably calls his staff policy entrepreneurs, which has helped to foster an amazing culture of innovation in the Office of Science and Tech Policy and across the White House. And finally, I'd like to recognize my remarkable teammates on the Social and Behavioral Sciences team. Over the past 2 years, they have built an institution from the ground up that agencies across the government have come to see as a valuable partner in achieving their goals. Because of their hard work and dedication, Americans are better off, and I feel humbled and privileged to work alongside them. The SBST family is a great one to be a part of. We are fortunate that our president continually puts science and technology at the center of his administration's efforts. And we are equally fortunate that our president's science advisor and the director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Dr. John Holdren, is a strong advocate for the value of applying research from the social and behavioral sciences to policy. It is now my deep pleasure to introduce you to Dr. John Holdren.
Well, thank you very much, Maya, and thank you even more for your amazing leadership of the Social and Behavioral Sciences team. And indeed, I will echo your thanks to that whole team for the amazing work that you have all done. I also want to recognize and thank Professor Cass Sunstein, who is really one of the intellectual fathers of the way in which insights from social and behavioral sciences can be applied to improve policy outcomes. And I think of Cass as sort of the godfather of this effort, and great of him to come down from Harvard and be here. Of course, thanks are also due to the National Economic Council, the Domestic Policy Council, the Council of Economic Advisors, and the Office of Management and Budget for co-hosting this event. And special recognition should also go to the General Services Administration for their critical support of this whole effort. I'm really delighted to see representatives from so many of the federal agencies and White House offices here at this event. It really testifies to the broad applicability of behavioral science insights in the policy domain. After all, any time a government program or policy interacts with people, and just about all of them do, whether it's offering low-income individuals school meal benefits, providing resources to formerly incarcerated individuals to assist with their transition back into civilian life, there's almost always an opportunity to improve those interactions using research insights that have been gained about how people respond to and engage with those particular programs. As President Obama noted in his Executive Order 13707, and I quote, "Behavioral science insights can support a wide range of national priorities, including helping workers to find better jobs, enabling Americans to lead longer, healthier lives, improving access to educational opportunities and support for success in school, and accelerating the transition to a low-carbon economy," end of quote. That executive order 13707 directs federal government agencies to apply behavioral science insights to their policies and programs, and it institutionalizes the Social and Behavioral Sciences team, the SBST, who have been a group of leading behavioral scientists and innovators recruited from across the country, and I don't know exactly how Maya did it, but she managed to recruit an absolutely first-class group who have done just amazing work. The experts who have served on that team have helped federal agencies harness behavioral science insights to improve programs, to better serve the nation, and all the while saving taxpayer dollars due to improvements in program integrity and efficiency. Today we're marking the one-year anniversary of that executive order, and I'm delighted to be able to report on the administration's progress in implementing this directive. Most of that progress, much of it anyway, is captured in the team's second annual report, which is being released today. Over the past year, the SBST has engaged in over 40 collaborations with agencies. It has successfully completed projects that help address some of the most important policy challenges facing this nation, from helping families obtain health insurance to helping the unemployed return to work more quickly. Among other results, SBST pilots led to more than 4,800 new enrollments and over $1 million in additional retirement savings by service members in just 1 month of the pilot. Led to a 63% increase in the rate at which family farmers obtained small business loans. Led to a doubling in the rate at which student loan borrowers in default contacted default resolution representatives. In addition to the second annual report, the administration is releasing new guidance to agencies that supports continued implementation of the Behavioral Science Insights Executive Order. That guidance will help agencies identify promising opportunities to apply behavioral science insights to their programs and policies. The actions that are being announced today demonstrate once again the administration's continuing commitment to ensure that the best available science and research make their way into the policy design process in order to better serve the American people. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce the next speaker, a person who has been a close friend and colleague, a great supporter of this work, Cecilia Munoz, Assistant to the President and Director of the Domestic Policy Council. Cecilia.
Thank you very much, John. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, you can do better than that. Good afternoon. It is lovely to see you all here. This is a topic that I'm actually quite passionate about. And I thank you, John, for your leadership on this and so many other tremendously important things. Maya, for your work in developing the second annual report. So I've been with the administration since the very beginning. I started the day after the inauguration. And I work at the Domestic Policy Council. I am a policy wonk not just by inclination. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. I am a fan of wonkery, and it is kind of how we do what we do. And I know that I'm not alone in this respect, particularly in this room. Cass Sunstein is sitting right there. I know he's another fan of wonkery. And we deal with a lot of complexity in the policy making that we do. And our job is not just to design good policy, which I like to think that we do pretty well, but to make sure that at the place where the policy rubber meets the road, where our policies are actually intersecting with people and their lives, that we've done a good enough job that the benefits that we hope, that we assess, that we have analyzed and thought might occur, actually occur in people's lives. That's kind of the point. It's why we're here. And the work of the behavioral sciences team has been tremendously, tremendously important. And among the great joys of my job has been to identify these places where I think of it as things you might not have learned in policy school turn out to be tremendously important in terms of the decisions that we make actually reaching people's lives. So we, for example, work very hard. The president worries very much about the high cost of a college education. About the students who struggle or former students who struggle with student loan debt. We work very hard and devised what I think is a pretty beautiful piece of policy making with respect to student loan repayment plans. You heard Dr. Holden talk about that a little bit, right? So we designed a policy, the president put forward a policy that allows folks who enroll, who make the decision to come forward, to be able to repay their student loan debt in increments that are no more than 10% of their income, which makes college debt potentially very affordable for those former students. It's a great piece of policy making, but it matters only if we're able to reach the students in question, the ones who will benefit from this policy. It's not meant for or designed to benefit everybody in every situation, but for the students that we're looking for, we need to find them, we need to reach them, and we need to make sure that the process is accessible enough so that they actually find their way to the program and find their way in the door. And this is an area where we have benefited from the wisdom of this team. And as you heard, we've dramatically increased the number of students who are participating. There's about 5 million now. We started at less than 1 million. And, we've managed to set ambitious goals on the basis of what we've learned from doing this work. We're working with states to enable automatic enrollment for people who are in Medicaid, who therefore qualify for free and reduced priced lunches, to make sure that we enroll them automatically rather than having folks jump through unnecessary hoops, because when you do that, you end up losing people. We're working to expand access to credit for family farms. And there's a whole host of things which, again, are really good policy making on paper, but if they remain on paper and we don't do the work to make sure that they actually connect with people at the place where they need this intersection in an effective way, then they stay words on paper. And it won't surprise you to know that the president that we work for doesn't think that's good enough, and neither do we, and it shouldn't be. So we've also applied this work on the criminal justice front, and I want to spend a minute on those policies, if you will be so kind as to hear me out, because this team has really played a tremendously important role in what is a tremendously important policymaking arena for us. So this is a place, again, where the president has made significant investment, where we have a lot of work to do, and where we hope to achieve really ambitious things for the American people. On things like policing, on things like prisoner reentry, folks who were formerly incarcerated. And one of the things that you learn when you, frankly, lock up people in the large numbers that we do in this country is that we don't think enough as a society about the fact that the vast majority of those people will also be walking back out that door. And we have a stake in their success when they do. We've learned a lot about what we do and don't do well with respect to prisoner reentry. And, this is a small example, but it is a telling example of the Bureau of Prisons, right? So the federal government owns a portion of the folks who are incarcerated in this country, the folks in the Bureau of Prisons in particular. And we learned in digging into what is the work that we do and don't do particularly well with respect to helping people be successful when they reenter, is that we weren't really providing them basic information to people who, in some cases, were incarcerated when the way you made a telephone call was to access a device which was connected to a wall. And of course now they're re-entering at a time when everything has changed. So we weren't providing basic information, and the behavioral sciences team helped the Bureau of Prisons develop, again, this is a very basic thing, but you'll see why it's important. It's a handbook that is made available to everybody in the system before they leave, which has fundamental information about how to get your hands on your Social Security card, which turns out to be pretty important if you're going to be finding a job, how to make sure that you have identification other than your Bureau of Prisons ID, how to address the question of maybe enrolling in Medicaid so that when you leave you have access to health care, accessing the internet, accessing a job, accessing educational services. We weren't doing a comprehensive job of making that information available to people. And this is something, again, it seems like a not rocket science kind of a thing. It's pretty basic, it's pretty fundamental, but that's exactly what it is. It's fundamental, and it's the kind of thing, the bare minimum of what we should be doing if we're going to be making sure people are successful. And the insights of this team helped us make sure that this was a really good, solid product, and it's going to make a difference in people's lives. So again, it's a small thing, but it's a telling example of, frankly, the ways in which government doesn't always work well in achieving our goals, and when applying this set of ideas and expertise can help us do a much better job. Another example, again, in a very, very important policy conversation that we're having around the country, has to do with policing. So after the events in Ferguson of now a couple of years ago, the president asked us to set up a task force, the president's task force on 21st century policing. It included experts in the policing field, police officers themselves, as well as organizers, people who had themselves been protesting against their local police and practices. And he asked that task force to produce a very thorough set of recommendations in 30 days, which in government speak is lightning speed. And he asked very specifically that those recommendations be very focused. He wanted them to be actionable. He wanted them to serve as a blueprint for police forces who wanted to move forward and do the right thing, as well as for organizers who wanted to push police forces to move forward and do the right thing. So we got a very actionable set of recommendations. We're very proud that these were actually consensus recommendations from folks who came at it from very different perspectives. And our job is to make sure that that isn't just another government report that sits on somebody's shelf somewhere collecting dust. The idea, again, was to make it something that could be used by all of the actors in this debate to make sure that that change actually begins to happen. And so one of the things that we've been working on, now that we have this very concrete set of ideas, is how do we, as a government, help facilitate the kinds of conversations that are happening around the country. There are 18,000 police forces around the country, small and large, some of which are very deeply involved in the reform conversation, some of which are not involved in it at all. And so again, if our job is to make sure, especially for those who are not engaged in this conversation at all, that folks in those communities have the tools that they need, we determined that you needed not just a report, although the report is an incredibly important tool, but also some tools to help facilitate an actual conversation. How do you keep a conversation substantive? How do you keep it focused on very specific recommendations? How do you keep it from going sideways in ways that are not particularly useful? And this is an area, again, where the behavioral science team has been absolutely invaluable. And we now have materials that we're road testing in communities that we think, again, are going to contribute to making sure this conversation is successful and actually sparking reforms, the kinds of reforms which we all understand are very badly needed in this country. So I could go on and on about this because, again, it's one of these areas where there's a set of expertise which is informing these very wonky decisions that we make, but actually giving those policies life and meaning and practicality in a way which I am quite certain wouldn't happen, frankly, if we wonks were just left to our own devices. At the end of the day, that's the point. It's why we're here. We're not about, making beautiful policy for its own sake. We're very proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and I think there is something to be said for the fact that we've known since the beginning that you have to be deliberate if the impact of your work is going to reach every community in every corner of this country. We had good confirmation this week in the Census Bureau's release of data that demonstrates that not only did we manage to increase median income by more than at any time, and reduce poverty by more than at any time since 1968, but we've done it in a way where the biggest gains are being felt by people at the bottom, people who were furthest left behind. You do that by being very deliberate about your policy making, by hopefully applying really informed judgment when you design the policies. But hopefully, if you're doing it really well, you think about how what you're doing when the policy rubber meets the road, when you're actually intersecting with people's lives. This work has been absolutely invaluable in making that happen. I am thrilled to see you all here to be part of this conversation. I'm really grateful to this team. They have very, very big fans of the Domestic Policy Council. And we just appreciate the momentum. We look forward to keeping it going. We look forward to building on what we've all learned from all of this to hopefully guide and inspire effective policymaking in the future. So thank you all very, very much.
Thanks to Cecilia for those remarks. I'd now like to ask the panelists to come up on stage and to have a discussion about tackling agency challenges using behavioral science insights. I think we're really lucky to have leaders from so many different agencies to talk about the diverse set of challenges that they face. Your most Roy Austin is the Deputy Assistant to the President for Urban Affairs, Justice, and Opportunity at the Domestic Policy Council.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And people will be very surprised to hear that I agree with everything that my boss just said, Cecilia Munoz. I do have to do a shout out to the fact that I know for a fact that I'm younger than at least one person in this audience, and that is my former law professor, Cass Sunstein. I do want to make that shout out. Look, I absolutely love the work of the social and behavioral sciences team. They get annoyed because I am regularly sending them new clients because I was introduced to them in something that I don't think you heard about already, which was with respect to Flint. So with Flint, Michigan, once again, a bunch of very smart people who have no idea how to talk to human beings produced some paper on this is how the federal government can help you. These are the resources that you need to look at. These are the things you need to do. It was, again, something that just was not accessible to people. I know this because I don't read half the things that come to me. I hate to say that for those of you who've ever given me something, but I don't have the time, I don't have the patience. I need something that is quick, that gets to the point fast, that actually has an amazing impact on me. So they did this with some paper that was handed out in Flint. And it completely, you just looked at the before and the after, and I was stunned by the difference and how it just told a story in a way that everyone could understand it. And when I say everyone, I'm not talking about everyone being what your educational level is. I'm talking about people who are just moving fast in this world, people who we just receive too much information on too many things, and it is something where I need to get it in the top line or it's gone. So I saw that and I grabbed them and I said, and we just received the documents that my boss Cecilia Munoz just mentioned on the reentry, what was happening on reentry. And here again, we got what came into us was something that was written by people who clearly hadn't kind of put the people who were reentering at the table and said, what do you need? What's going to be most helpful to you? And they did that, and the product, and I hope you all look it up if they're not distributing it, was something which is phenomenal. And I know that there's a story of at least one person talking about how this product actually helped him out. And again, I've used them. I've used them again and again. And now, most recently, just last week, we released something on school resource officers. And for those of you who understand and know the conversation, we have a number of schools, probably about 50% of the schools, using police officers at the school. Now, we respect the fact and understand the fact that there are some very dangerous school districts, and you want your kids to be safe. But what is happening is a lot of teachers are sending their kids to these school resource officers or bringing in the school resource officers for the most minor infractions. And this is really the start of the school to prison pipeline in far too many cases. So we created, or the Department of Education, working with the Department of Justice, created this rubric to talk to schools about what they need to do. I read what came to me and I'm like, I don't understand this. I can't follow it. It's not coming to me fast enough. And I immediately reached out to Maya, Amira, Crystal, my buddies.
We don't read half the things you send us, Roy.
So I put it in the top line. It said very quickly, fix this, please. And again, the product that came back was so much better. So the one thing I want to say here is, if you are not working with SBST, if you do not have SBST in your agency, you are making an enormous mistake because no one is reading your stuff. Okay, so make sure you bring them in. If you're going to spend all that time working on that stuff, you got to make it something that the people will access and read and look at and understand and drive the community to action. And that's I'm just here to basically preach the power of the social and behavioral sciences team. So thank you.
Wow, Ben, try to follow that. So Ben Belton, who we're delighted to have here today, is Senior Advisor to the Acting Commissioner in the Office of the Commissioner in the Social Security Administration.
Yes, well, good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to see you all today. Thank you so much for everything that you do day in and day out in communities all across the country in support of our agency and in support of our beneficiaries. Maya, thank you so very much for everything that you do. Your leadership, you're such a joy to work with, and The work you've done has been transformational, and the team you've put together, thank you all so very much for everything that you do for our agency and our beneficiaries. I want to give you all greetings on behalf of our agency's acting commissioner, Ms. Carolyn Colvin. She sends her regards and also her appreciation for all you do as well. I see one of my good colleagues, John Phillips, in the audience. He's actually leading this work for our agency and managing all of these projects. So John, thank you so much for all you do, and we really appreciate you as well. I heard a story recently that really solidified in my mind why this work is so important and why our agency's programs are so important. It was a story about one of our beneficiaries who had cancer. She said that without her Social Security, she would have to scramble to have her basic needs met, and she might even be living on the streets. That without her benefits, she would not be as healthy as she is right now, and her life would be an absolute horror story. She says she doesn't know how she would be able to provide for herself. And I lost my mother to cancer recently, well, in recent years, and a few days ago, one of my close relatives just told me that they also had cancer, and they're also a Social Security beneficiary. So the work that we are doing in support of our beneficiaries is just life-changing, and it means so much to so many millions of people and to me personally. So just thank you all so very much for everything that you do. One of our agency's critical priorities is to improve services for beneficiaries who face these types of hardships and transitions and uncertainties. So we were so very thrilled a few months ago, we had a chance to meet with Tom and the team over at the GSA a few months ago to talk about how behavioral science insights could improve our communications and increase access to benefits, but also improve our services. They took a holistic look at all of our programs and our beneficiaries, and I believe in social science circles, they might call this a behavioral mapping. I mean, I took sociology in school, but I'm not as smart as you guys, so forgive me for that. But then they gave us some really great ideas on how we can improve our response rates, simplify our applications and our renewal processes, and collaborate with other federal agencies like HUD that serve similar populations. I'm going to today to highlight a few of our projects that we're doing using behavioral science insights. So first we have a project to help retirees, workers actually, who are claiming retirement benefits, claiming Social Security before their full retirement age. They might be subject to the retirement earnings test, what we call the RET. The RET may defer benefits for people, but not permanently reduce benefits. Workers don't always understand this, and they make decisions based on sometimes faulty information. They face choices on how much to work, if they should work, and when they should claim. And these choices they make could have labor market implications for this particular constituency. Our pilot will test ways of communicating about the RET to help workers and empower them to make better informed decisions. So our second pilot program is on spousal benefits. Some people who claim spousal benefits do it based on their spouse's work history. They often don't know they may be entitled to a higher benefit if they claim on their own work history. So we are testing a new notice that is simpler and emphasizes action steps they could take to better enable them to apply for and receive a higher benefit on their own record. The third project that we're doing is providing helpful information to our SSDI applicants whose applications have been denied. We're providing them with information about other services they may qualify for, such as vocational rehab, employment support, healthcare, and other supports through the American Job Centers. We should be able to determine soon if this information affects appeals, earnings, and participation in vocational rehab programs. The fourth project is in support of our SSI beneficiaries. Beneficiaries who receive SSI are required to report life factors that may impact their eligibility and benefit amounts, such as their work, income, change of address, and household. SSA does advise these beneficiaries of their reporting responsibilities, but many still indicate they don't know what, when, or to whom they should report. Our pilot is testing communications to beneficiaries to encourage more accurate reporting, reducing payment errors, and enhancing the program integrity. Early results have been very encouraging, and we're looking forward to the full set of results in 2017. I'm also very excited about the work that we are doing to increase access to benefits for low-income older people around the Medicare low-income subsidy and our SSI program. Many people who qualify for these low-income programs don't receive it, and oftentimes because they don't know about it. So there was actually a report that was issued in 2010 that showed there are 2.3 million people who are eligible for the Medicare low-income subsidy but don't receive it. The subsidy is worth about $4,000 a year for people who are often struggling to make ends meet. In my position, I hear a lot of stories from seniors who are having to choose between food and medications and having to split pills at night or go hungry because they can't afford their prescription drugs. So this benefit and all of these benefits I'm talking about today are absolutely life-changing for an older person who's struggling to make ends meet, and everything that we are doing is really improving the lives of so many people around our country. I see that I am just about out of time, so I want to thank you all so very much for being here, for all that you do, and I will turn the program over to our next panelist.
Thank you so much. All right, so we will now hear from Elizabeth Fox, who's Director of the Office of Infectious Diseases and Deputy Coordinator for Maternal and Child Survival.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you very much for the team and the social and behavioral science team. You are a great partner, and we are a somewhat different kind of wonky because we're not domestic. Here at USAID, we work in international programs, but in many ways, we're a very natural fit with your team because the biggest part of a public health program is behavior and human behavior. And very simple behaviors change lives. We've seen that very simple behaviors like washing your hands or breastfeeding or taking your child to be vaccinated are just key to reducing mortality and morbidity. So we come together very much on that behavioral part. And we've been working with the team since 2014, applying behavioral insights, looking at low-cost evaluations, and then seeing how we can scale those up in our programs around the world. We work very hard in USAID looking at evidence and looking at innovation, and this is a perfect opportunity to find both of those. The other nice thing about working with your team, Maya, and with all of the people here is that we get to look at the domestic part and the international part. And there's ways that we can work together and share both ways. Because I think some of the things that we're learning are things that as a development agency can be applied domestically and vice versa. So this is very exciting. When you started some of the introductory speeches, you talked about how this program is improving the lives of Americans. And I'd like to say it's not only improving the lives of Americans, it's improving the lives of people around the world. And that's an important part of it. USAID is very much based on innovation and on new technologies, and that's one of the things we're working with you on. We're very much based on making sure that development dollars are applied rigorously and that are tested in terms of impact. And we're very much working in terms of partnerships. We have a lot of big problems. I mean, you have big problems too. We have big problems too, but we also have enormous returns. Once a solution to things like looking at how to make sure that all the kids are vaccinated, or looking at breastfeeding rates internationally, you're going to have a very big impact internationally on child stunning and on child health. So big problems, big solutions. It's great to work with you. But it's not easy. And one of the things that we found working across the globe is there are a lot of challenges. You have data challenges. If you work internationally, you have different kinds of data challenges. And an important part of working with the social and behavioral science team is having good data. So I think one of the big impacts of working with you has been able to apply that within the agency and really assess how good the data is or where it needs improvement. Another question is scale. And sometimes when you talk about a program, Ben, or when you talk, Roy, about a program, you can immediately go to scale once you figure it out. When we find out something working with your team, we have to say, now how do we work with a foreign government or with another partner to take that to scale? So we're working within a program, but we're not the owners. So it's also working very much in partnership around the world to make sure that these insights are applied in programs. The team, the social and behavioral science team, started out using their own bag of tricks to figure out how the agency could figure out where are the most innovative ways to start. So they did a competition. And there were over 100 participants from across all the USAID missions who said, we have a problem and we'd like to work with you. And they selected from those, they were 25 countries, over 100 participants, and they selected 5 teams from 4 different country teams, 2 teams in the same country, that are going to be working on different problems. And I'll tell you about 2 of those. And then they put them together in a very high-pressured environment for 2 days to try to come up with a problem definition, to try to come up with the kinds of high-impact behavioral interventions that could be evaluated and tested. One of the teams that emerged from that pressure cooker was a team in Ethiopia that's looking at increasing HIV/AIDS medication adherence among high-risk female sex workers. HIV/AIDS prevalence in Ethiopia is about 1% in the general population. About a quarter of the high-risk populations are HIV/AIDS positive. Medications is available, people aren't taking it. So the question was, how do you increase adherence to medication? And the type of impact and the type of intervention that was looking at was very much looking at follow-up using a mobile phone and an encouragement regarding doctor's appointments. And that is ongoing, and that's going to have a huge impact in our HIV/AIDS programs and adherence around the world. Another project that came to the top was in a very different area, in malaria in Nigeria, looking at increasing the numbers of times that women come back. Pregnant women are very much at risk for dying of malaria, and their children. And if women can come for 4 antenatal visits and get intermittent preventive treatment for malaria, that risk goes way down. So women come and they come for 1 treatment, but they don't come back, or they come for 2 and they don't come back. So how to make them come for 4? And so working very much with behaviorally designed referral forms to improve the rate at which pregnant women will be referred by volunteers and can come back. And this will have a huge impact on morbidity and mortality from malaria. So thank you to the team. Thank you for working with us. Thank you for shaking out our shaky data and working with us on research designs that can be applied around the world. We look forward to the next 5 years of our agreement. Thank you.
That's the benefits of the MOU.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Next, we're going to hear from Calvin Johnson, who is Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Research, Evaluation, and Monitoring at the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Good afternoon. So I'm glad to be here, and I do want to give a shout out before I get started to SBST and your team members, Mike D., Amira, and then our team, Leah Lozier and Barry Steffen. Just been really great partners and really loved working with them. And I'm really excited about this, so if I get kind of giddy, excuse me. I'm glad to be here as a representative of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, but also as a subcommittee member of the Social and Behavioral Sciences team. So how did we get introduced to SBST? Well, last summer we had a PMF who did her developmental assignment with SBST. She came back to the office, she told us about all the great things that we were doing. We connected, we established a working relationship, and here we are today, and I'm going to share some of the things that we're doing with you. I'm excited to share with you our first project, and I'll be talking about that today, and I'm equally excited to share with you commitments we are announcing today about work that we will be doing in the future with SBST. For HUD, behavioral science insight can be a very important part of what it is we do to support low-income families, particularly trying to figure out how is it that we use housing as a platform to improve the quality of lives of those that we serve. We like to think about housing as, all right, you put people in housing, great, so now they have a roof over their head. But we like to think about housing as a portal into other aspects of folks' lives. That is, how is it that we use housing as a way to improve non-housing outcomes? And so I'm going to be talking about a non-housing outcome that we worked on with SBST. Our mission is really about making certain that we are providing ladders of opportunities, creating opportunities for folk who actually live in the houses that we provide or the homes that we provide. And also, how is it that we support families in all communities in all areas of this country to reach their full potential? So how is it that we do that? So, and the way that we think about housing as a platform for upward mobility, we really have to think about, all right, well, housing is a portal. So if we're housing low-income folk, it can be a portal for changing lives. That is, a portal into the non-housing outcomes that those folk who live in our housing, that the folk who live in our housing are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Then when we think about upward mobility, we have to think about education. Now, really quickly, the best performing students in high-income families are as likely to go to college as, the lowest performing, let me back up. The lowest performing students in high-income families are just as likely to actually attend college as the best performing students in low-income families. That math just doesn't add up, right? It just doesn't add up. And one of the barriers for low-income kids going to school is basically completing the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, even though they're the most in need of the aid. So with SBST and the Department of Education, we worked on this challenge. And really quickly, this is actually going to be in the 2016 annual report, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. So we know that there are things like access to the internet, misconception about the actual or the true cost of going to school. These are some of the barriers that are actually present. And as a result of that, we have students who fail to complete the FAFSA. So what we've done is we basically created a test where we're looking at whether we can use mail messaging as a way to increase FAFSA take-up. And so what we wanted to do, we started off by looking at children in our Housing Choice Voucher program. These are kids who whose families who we give a voucher and they can go and rent anywhere on the open market, just like any one of us that would want to rent. And so we started with them. We looked at those who were ages 17 to 20. We have 9 variants of the messages. We basically had the Federal Student Aid, FSA, as a messenger. We had the First Lady as a messenger. Really happy that she agreed to do that. And then we had a variant of her message where she provided a personal message and she adopted the FSA message so that we could test whether it was the message or the messenger. We use 3 formats. We use a standard letter, a letter with a paper copy of the FAFSA, and this is going to be interesting because there's at least a signal, although it's a signal that having a paper FAFSA, there may be something there even though everything is moving to the internet. So what does that mean for us moving forward? A light signal. And then we use the postcard. Each of the 9 variants, we had 5,000 kids sampled into those 9 variants, 150,000 in the actual control group. We have a lot of folk living in public and assisted housing, so we have the actual ability to do this. And this is just one of our major program areas, right? Just one of them. And then we use administrative data match. So those folk in the audience who are really excited about that, using administrative data match to actually learn and learn quickly. So the top line, there was no significant effect, right? And the impacts were really low. However, I think that there are some promising signs here. So what we found is that 22% of the individuals who were sent some type of mailing actually completed the FAFSA, which is 0.3 a percentage point higher than the actual control group. Small, but a signal to me, right? The most effective sender was the First Lady, and I'm not making that up. The most effective sender, and using her personal story, right? So using her personal story, not the message that she adopted from FSA. The most effective format, again, this is why I said, oh, this is gonna be challenging. The most effective format is a letter that also had the paper FAFSA in it. So while the findings weren't all that significant, right, I think that this really tells us something about the way that we've done this. One, it was low cost, and believe it or not, it was large scale. So how do you get in-house in your federal agencies, just like ours, to actually implement a low-cost, rigorous RCT in-house with the support of SBT, really talented folk, and we actually enjoy working with them. And so we saw this as a proof of concept, demonstrating that we can do this, and we can do this moving forward. We also see this as a way of demonstrating how we use mail, not only to nudge people, but perhaps even to just provide basic information. And so we're excited about it. So what are some of our next steps? So I said that I would be announcing some things. So HUD and SBST will be rolling out phase 2 of our experiment. And phase 2 basically involves us testing the mail messages, but also adding a technology component. Since technology is going to be pretty much the way that we communicate to folk, we're going to be adding a technology component, and we're going to move our work into public housing. So the idea here is mail nudge and then figure out how we use technology to actually reinforce those nudges. And we're expanding, so we learned from some baseline work, we're expanding it from 17 to 20 to 17 to 24, because we do have a large group of folk who low-income folk take longer to complete school, and that's okay, so we're gonna expand the group. We also announced the Ross for Education funding opportunity, which is a NOFA. We're setting aside $2 million in grant funding to public housing authorities to actually deploy education navigators who will provide assistance working with kids and their families completing the FAFSA, financial literacy, college readiness, making certain that they are applying for other scholarships, and then also once they're accepted to school and they start school, making certain that they move along. So that money will be set aside. So in closing, one of the nice things about working with SBST is that we've learned that when you have the right partner, you have skilled partners, you don't have to fear, right? You don't have to fear as much. And that you can figure out how to incorporate and build capacities within your own shop to expand behavioral insight in the work that you do on a day-to-day basis. It has also been exciting to actually conduct a large-scale RCT within our organization. Excited to do that. We asked yesterday whether it would be true to say that this is the first time we have done this at HUD. And it's the first time we've done a large scale. We've done small scale, but the first time we've done large scale. So we're really excited and thank you all for that. And I'm excited to see how this collaboration continues to grow and move forward and what's next for us. Thank you.
All right, we're now going to hear from Elizabeth Kelly, who is Special Assistant to the President for Economic Policy at the National Economic Council.
Thanks, Maya. I'm so excited to be here today. I've had the pleasure of working with Maya and her team since before there was a team. It was just Maya. She was brand new on a fellowship. My portfolio covered retirement and pensions, which, as many of you know, is one of the areas where there's been real and early evidence of how behavioral sciences can help people save through auto-enrollment, get them to save more through auto-escalation, and make sure they're doing it in a smart way by putting them in a vehicle that sort of shifts over time. So naturally, we wanted Maya involved in these conversations. She was tremendous value add then, and has been even more value add as she's built her team to, 20 people now? As Roy said, I too am guilty of continually sending clients their way, including one I haven't told you about yet. But today I want to talk a little bit about the terrific work that Maya and her team have done on retirement in terms of helping service members save, as well as federal civilian workers, and helping the Treasury Department with a new product, MyRA, geared at workers who don't have access to a workplace savings plan. I'll try and keep it short so we have plenty of time for questions.
Can you say the italics in Maya when you speak? Or?
What was that?
Every instance of mine must be italicized.
Trust me, that has been drilled into me by the Treasury Department. So as I said, our first project together was helping service members save for retirement. Military service members oftentimes don't put as much for retirement as you would like them to. Unlike federal civilian workers who are automatically enrolled, service members are not. As a result, you see that only 43% of service members contribute to the federal savings program, the Thrift Savings Plan, versus 87% in the civilian space. This is also because of another bias. The military provides a very generous pension to those who serve 20 years, and people sign up and think, I'm going to get the pension, I don't need to save for retirement. But in fact, only 20% of people actually make it all 20 years and are able to receive that benefit, making it all the more important the other 80 are saving for retirement through the TSP. The good news is that thanks to legislation passed last year, starting in 2018, new service members will be automatically enrolled in the Thrift Savings Plan. But Maya and entire SBST team, shout out to Bill and Will if they're in the audience, have done great work in making sure that service members already in the military are encouraged to save and are saving more. They started off simple. Something as basic as sending an email reminder to the 800,000 service members who were not enrolled yielded real results. They got 67% more service members enrolled in the TSP, resulting in more than $1.3 extra million in savings. Then they were able to leverage what's called in-processing. So when a service member goes to a new military base, they have to fill out paperwork, go through the orientation, the same usual thing. The SBST team had the smart idea to add a form asking service members to make an active choice about whether or not they want to enroll in the Thrift Savings Plan. They started off at Fort Myer, and at the time, service members didn't even have to turn in the form. They just had to simply fill it out. And 8.7% of service members newly enrolled in the TSP thanks to this intervention. When they tweaked it the following year and required service members at Fort Lewis to actually submit this form, the enrollment rate was 12.7%. And the good news is you're seeing even higher rates of enrollment among lower earning, lower ranked service members, the folks who are least likely to get the pension, and the ones who are probably have the least in retirement savings. Building on the success with the military TSP, the SBST's team's also done great work with the broader federal worker population. Working with the Department of Treasury, they're trying to increase the number of employees that contribute at least 5%. So as many of you may know, federal workers are enrolled at a 3% default rate, which is certainly not enough to have the nest egg that you need come retirement. And it's also leaving money on the table. Your employer, the federal government, will actually match up to 5% in savings. So workers should have every incentive to save that 5%, but are subject to the same biases all of us are. And SBST in this ongoing project is figuring out ways to make people save more. The last thing that I'll mention is the MyRA, which, as I said, is the Department of Treasury's new starter savings product aimed at workers who do not have access to a workplace retirement savings plan. The SBST's team has been prompting filers at the end of their tax filing process, a moment when they're really thinking about sort of their financial health and their fiscal future, to open a MyRA using their tax refund. And we're excited the results of that. A couple of things to announce in terms of next steps. Social Behavioral Sciences team is working to facilitate data sharing between Treasury and OPM to try and shift more folks into appropriate savings vehicles. So as I said, people are automatically enrolled at 3% in what's called the G Fund, which is government savings bond with about a 2% return depending on what interest rates are doing. I think most economists would tell you you're going to want to be in sort of a higher performing vehicle like a life cycle fund or target date fund. So the SBST team is analyzing how to get people to default into the vehicle that's right for them. They'll also continue their work with DoD and OPM to make sure that service members are better prepared for retirement, including helping with the implementation of the new law I talked about, and working with the MyRA team as they continue to scale their project. So again, I just want to say thank you for the terrific work that the entire team has done in helping people across the country be better prepared for retirement. I'm really excited for the work ahead and the chance to continue working with them.
All right, so we will open up for a few questions. I'll begin with one, and if there's any questions from the audience, we'll take them. So one thing that you mentioned in particular, Calvin, is the importance of building capacity in agencies. And I think that as we look to the coming years and the future of SBST, one of our goals is to create this sort of organic capacity within government agencies so that first of all, there's more expertise and there's more people working on this stuff, but also I think it's more sustainable and it's more closely connected with the daily policy and program struggles that the agency faces. So in the particular case of HUD, we obviously were very fortunate to have Leah as our Presidential Management Fellow. And then she went back and we paid her a lot to say really nice things about us. So that was a wonderful way of resource sharing. You know, we benefited, you guys benefited. What are other ways that you can think of that we can start trying to build this capacity? And I'd love to hear from the other panelists if they have any other thoughts. I was joking about the payment thing for all the lawyers in the room.
So we're talking about this a whole lot. So one of the things that we talk about around capacity building is making certain that we give staff the opportunity to do this work. And this is the same in other agencies. Look, I'll gladly send more staff on 6-month details to do this type of work if it means that they can come back or work with other agencies to advance this work. You'd be surprised if I told you that if we spent, if you take out the personnel costs, we spent probably about $45,000 on this project. And what that tells us is that, wow, we could do a lot more of this if we had the staff with the right skill set. So if we could figure out a way to get more staff trained up, even if it's a way of bringing staff into the mix where they are not necessarily working on their agency's work, but just learning what that playbook looks like. How is it that you implement this? What are the types of kind of techniques and skills that you have to actually develop? And then perhaps figure out what a project might look like for them, not necessarily a project back in their home agency. I think that we're going to see more and more discussion of this type of approach, whether it's a fellowship, details. We're just going to talk about this more and more. We're up to our ears in data. We can't sift through the data that we have in our own agencies. It's just a ripe time right now to actually figure out how to solve this problem.
So that's a really great question. And at SSA, I think we were kind of early adopters of this way of thinking, at least. We actually have had, for a while now, our own behavioral scientist on the team, and he's sitting back there, Laith. Good to see you, sir. So, we're early adopters in this way of thinking, but I think for other agencies to really help, would really help other agencies to understand the human dimension of policymaking, the social dimensions of everything that we do, especially for agencies that are providing benefits or services or on the ground dealing with real people every day and doing things to improve their health, their well-being, or their economic outlook. I think that just by having that way of thinking more ingrained in the agencies, even if you hire more people who are social scientists who bring that way of thinking, I can't say enough really how transformative this has been for our agency, an agency that provides millions of benefits to millions of people every day. We serve about 60 million people, and so many of them are, as I said earlier, are in times of hardship, transition, and uncertainty. And to be able to apply a behavioral scientific way of thinking about how we're approaching policy development, communications, improving our services, it's just been a life change for so many people. And I just encourage you all to just change your way of thinking and really see the human and social dimensions of everything you're trying to do.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the audience? Or we can move on to our next speaker.
Maya, can I jump in on
Absolutely.
on a capacity building? One of the things that I think has been most useful for us, because we do have social scientists and behavioral scientists scattered across the agency, but what's been amazing is the way you've been able to link with universities and bring in the academic institutions and bring in those people to spend time either in the field or in Washington with us, and then go back into their worlds and begin to bring us into that as a research question, but then also bring it out to them in terms of changing their research question to be more policy relevant. So it's been, I think, the capacity building, without saying you've got to build it all in the agency, the links have just been invaluable.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, of course.
I'm sorry, just one more thing. I think that your team was really helpful to us because you came in not with necessarily a bunch of new projects and creating new work. You already tried to see what we were already doing to support our beneficiaries and what our mission and our vision was, and you really saw how you could add value to what we were already doing. And I think that was an amazing feat to come and really piggyback on things that we were already doing and show how your team could add value, how the behavioral sciences could add value to what we were doing, and to really increase your mission and to further your vision. It was just brilliant how you did it. So thank you.
Okay, well, I want to do a round of applause for the amazing panelists. Thank you so much.